Alright, we're going to do a little video here on the 12th of September 2023. I've got a long running thread over there in Rimfire Central. It talks about squirrel hunting. I show a lot of the videos. Practically all of my harvest of the squirrels, some deer, turkeys, groundhogs. There's an 81-year-old gentleman over there that's asked a question in this thread concerning barking gray squirrels. How do you locate a barking gray squirrel? Well, a barking gray squirrel and a barking fox squirrel, their behavior will be different. I'll just go there first. A barking fox squirrel. A barking fox squirrel, or a non-barking fox squirrel for that matter. The fox squirrel has a much higher tendency to come at you in the woods. He will try to get in over your head, more so than a gray squirrel. And when a fox squirrel does that, it's almost game over, boys, hunting with a rifle. And you have to anticipate this and try to cut him off. Cut him out of the tree before he pulls that stun on you, okay? So a fox squirrel can be barking or not barking, and depending on how close to him you get, he may try to come straight in over your head. A gray squirrel's tendency is to go away from you. Okay, let's talk about a barking gray squirrel. How do you locate one? Well, you have to use your ears, okay? And you can use your eyes. Well, you use your ears to try to estimate distance. Now, you gotta look at things like the wind, okay? You gotta base this also on the volume of the bark of the squirrel. A squirrel that turns around on the backside of a tree barking, remember, a barking gray squirrel can be barking at something beside you in the woods. It may not be barking at you. You think he's barking at you. He could go around on the backside because that's the direction, the supposed danger that's threatening him. So if he does that, his bark, he'll sound like he's farther away from you versus closer if he comes on your side of the tree. The frequency of the bark tells you something about that squirrel too. If he's barking real fast, he's in distress, okay? Meaning he is really high strung. It won't take much to get that dude to leave, go in a hole, okay? Usually a gray squirrel, if they're barking, they can bark fast and settle down, okay, and bark slow, and then they can go to a whine bark, but a lot of times a squirrel can do a whine bark without doing the medium fast bark. A whine bark on a squirrel, they're irritated with something, but they're generally not in high alert mode, okay? But that whine bark is very low sounding. You got to have a good ear for it to hear it. There's some birds in the woods can sound similar to a whine bark on a squirrel, so you got to sort of be careful there and be, So anyway, what about this barking gray squirrel? A steadily barking gray squirrel. That would be considered a squirrel that's on fairly high alert. What do you do? Well, you have to try to read that squirrel's mind, and you have to base this. I base this on tendencies I see of gray squirrels. Number one, a barking gray squirrel. The odds of him being at the top of a tree are slim and none. He will generally be mid-levels in a smaller tree, okay? Or he'll be on the first limb of a big piece of timber. That's where they like to set up barking. But that may be where they start, and then they start working their way up the tree. Okay? Now, a barking gray squirrel, another thing that you'll notice about them, they will very seldom, now they can climb and bark, climb up a tree and while they're barking, okay? But if they are stationary, generally barking, they will either be perched, sitting upright, or they will be upside down on the trunk. Their head won't be up, it will be down. They're looking. They've done heard something. They're trying to figure out what it is. Now, The steadily barking gray squirrel. Well, the name of your game is you need to find him, and depending on what weapon you've got, you could be range restricted with a scatter gun. You could be range restricted with an air rifle, a 22 long rifle. I'm not so range restricted with an HM2 rimfire. If I can see that squirrel, I can kill him. Okay? If he lets me see that head, I can bust that head. So all I'm trying to do is see the squirrel. I don't have to worry about getting too close, but I do need to be able to get into a position to see him. Gray squirrels have a tendency when they're barking. If they don't never see you, they'll look for you. So what I'm saying is you want to make the squirrel hunt you. And generally, for them to see you, they'll have to go into an area, a lane where they can see you. So if you will position yourself and say, well, I'm not going to go any farther because he'll see me. I'm going to stay right here and gamble that he'll move to the right or left or come down or possibly go up, but they don't generally go way, way up in timber after they've started barking fast, okay? So he will expose himself to you. You just have to hold your position, but you have to get some experience in doing this. So you want to actually see that tree there in that camera? If you're approaching a barking gray squirrel, then you can judge the distance. Let's say sharpshooter hears one out here and the leaves are on. Now 60 yards in the woods is a lot tough to shoot a squirrel as far as seeing him. So let's say you decide, that squirrel sounds like he's about 60 yards from me. What I'm going to do when I start heading to that squirrel is I'm going to keep as much between me and that squirrel as I can for cover. I'm not going to be over here in the open if that squirrel is over there behind that barn, up there over there at that barn. I'm going to keep something like that tree right there. I'm going to keep brush, cedar, anything I can keep between me and that squirrel because, you can sort of judge the woods. A lot of times in the woods, you start getting past 40 yards, it can be tough to see a gray squirrel with leaves on. Okay? And you have to slip. You can't go through there like a gorilla. Now, there is some instances where you do get in a position. Okay, you're in position, meaning you have got a lane where if that squirrel shows itself, you can blast him, okay? There are some instances where you could take a chance and make a small amount of noise. And he might move to look, make him curious, okay? Now, barking gray squirrel, here's something you have to keep in mind. One barking gray squirrel could mean there's 8 other squirrels there. There could be 6, there could be 20. You don't know. So depending on how much longer you plan on hunting, the time of day, okay? Is it getting dark on you? Is it getting up past 9:30 in the morning? Well, squirrels get fidgety then. The sun comes up, gets bright, they get full. So you might not want to advance so much on that barking gray squirrel. You might want to sit back and take a better assessment. Like, wait a minute. Well, there's about 6 squirrels there. Well, if one of those other 6 squirrels sees you and starts moving through that timber, shaking limbs real hard, you know what that means. It's game over, okay, with a rifle. So you have to, so you may not want to necessarily go after that barking squirrel. He may lead you to the pot of gold, so to speak. Okay? Now, shooting that barking squirrel, one thing I've noticed, if you shoot that barking squirrel and you can get in a position, and if you hold your ground after you shoot that squirrel and you don't miss with the first shot, be still. Those other squirrels generally won't be, they'll actually try to go down on the ground or go into the same area in the tree looking at that squirrel that failed. And that may give you some other shot opportunities. Okay? This also applies to a fox squirrel. If you shoot a fox squirrel out, regardless if you've seen more than one or not, as you approach to pick that fox squirrel up, a lot of times I've looked up and a fox squirrel be looking at me. He was watching that dead fox squirrel. He knew right where it fell. So maybe this will help answer that gentleman's question. There's some of you beginner squirrel hunters out there. This is some awfully good information. That's all I can tell you from many, many hours in the woods. Hope you enjoyed.